Good afternoon, LinkedIn friends, Value First Nation. Welcome to another episode of Value First Delivery here with Erin Wiggers, talking about natural value flow over control and handoffs and just all this other stuff that tends to get in the way. How are we doing today, Erin?
Doing awesome. Super excited to talk about this. As we were chatting earlier, in a previous life, I was a scientist, and so thinking about things in kind of a scientific way is always fun for me.
Yeah, and this is kind of the principle, the commitment that started Value First. Um, and I'll give some backstory there after hitting on the the principle itself. Um, so we will enable natural value flow, not just manage handoffs. We understand that value emerges continuously. We will create seamless delivery experiences rather than enforcing rigid stage gates and transitions that interrupt natural progress and create friction. And when I was, when I started the conversation with Claude about that led to Value First, it was from a place of, okay, silos suck. Like whatever we've been doing is not working because the handoffs are often the worst moments of like customer experience. And so, from an AI native perspective, how would you build an organization uh, if you didn't know about marketing and sales and the whole industrial perspective? Like start from scratch. And inside of the first response, what is do anything possible to not get in the way of the flow of value, right? And like now that now that we can be enabled with just like asking, AI, or it's always been asking humans to help do the next step. Like, how did we get here to this place where we develop so much complexity around the process where it it, it creates just these moments of friction that when you can step back and if you're not a part of that process, it's like, of course, like, why are you doing that? You're just getting in the way of all these people who are interested in participating, and like you're not letting them. Literally, like, how did we get there?
For sure. I I wonder about this a lot, especially because it's so deflating when because I've always kind of sat in between the sales and service sides, and so I'm talking to people and translating what they want into technical specs and then helping the team. So like I've always kind of felt like it was my job to make that a more seamless kind of transition, because that's just something that has always bothered me. It's like if the team's super excited, you just closed a new deal, they're going to have their kickoff, the team, you know, gets into the meeting, and then you're just like blindsided because you didn't know XYZ detail that was discussed kind of upstream from you. And then it's, everybody's mad at everybody because, who dropped the ball. And it's like, it's really not it's not so much that any one person dropped the ball, is that we didn't set up systems to capture and persist that value as you move downstream. And so it feels very disconnected. It feels like, you know, I've heard clients say things like, bring back my sales team. And it's like, the sales team is not gonna be able to help you do this. Like, I really hate it. Like, they're great people, but um and but I get it. I get it, because you in the discovery process, a lot of times, with these kind of longer procurement processes, you are getting input from the C-suite and getting input from a lot of different people, and that's the value. Like that is the true value that you're capturing. And so to not be able to then translate, like for the game of telephone to break that quickly is, it's just so deflating. And so um so yeah, I've kind of always seen it as my personal mission to cut down on that. But yeah, it's really, it's about building systems that almost like I don't know why my mind went here, but like the old school, like Aztec, um, like waterways that they built like into the mountains so that it would like collect upstream and trickle all the way down. You know, that's what I think about when I think about like enabling that natural flow. It's like you've got to work with the landscape that you're in. You've got to be able to capture it where it's kind of coming into the system, and you've got to be able to carry it forward in some meaningful way. And so yeah, I think that's I don't know why that's the image that comes to my mind, but that's kind of how I picture what needs to happen versus what actually we've seen play out.
Yeah. And where my mind went, like based on that analogy, what often happens is like, because usually there's a great pain related to whatever the new thing is, and people have banded together to like yeah, let's do this, right? So imagine like bringing them all up the mountain, which was hard,
Right.
right? And then getting up there, and people got to get back down the mountain, but like we're not letting them go. Like somehow going down is harder than it was to go up. And as we think about all these struggles that we hear about, like 50% adoption rates, and like the in my opinion, the problem with SaaS is like they're not going back up the mountain like the next time, right? So now it's just one person up there, and they've got to try and figure out how to deliver value
Right.
without the help. And then it's just a like because they can't, because they don't have the people there, right? So I'm gonna hit these bullets. You've already hit on some of them. Like if we're actually trying to enable value flow instead of controlling it, that means we're eliminating, unnecessary steps, approvals, and gates that slow down the value delivery rather than maintaining control through complex processes. We're going to share information openly rather than restricting it to maintain artificial competitive advantage. We're going to create direct connections between teams based on value creation needs rather than forcing communication through formal channels. You can design flexible pathways that adapt to how work naturally wants to flow rather than imposing standardized processes. And we're going to remove artificial boundaries between provider and customer organizations rather than maintaining separation for project management convenience. I imagine you have some thoughts on that last one, but any of those, like what stands out to you?
Yeah, all of them. I think what it really boils down to for me um, is trust. Um, I've I've always worked in like the kind of documentation that I do, in the solutions that I pitch. I think in order to build a foundation of trust, you really need to demonstrate like, I listen to you, I understand your problem, I know how to solve it. Here are the exact steps. Um, and people buy into that. And so when there's any kind of friction down the road, you're really just chipping away at trust. And when you put up those artificial boundaries, or um, you know, have hoops to jump through to get anything going, again, you're just chipping away at that trust. And once that's gone, it's kind of like you said when you're climbing the mountaintop, it's like that's your like peak amount of trust that you have when they say, okay, I'm going to pay you to do this thing for me. That's like the ultimate demonstration of trust. And you really can only go down from there. And so the more you can do along the way to kind of facilitate trust the way you would with anyone else, the way you would with, it's like if I had a full on conversation with you about my dogs or something, and then two days later you thought I was a cat person. Like the discontinuity of that experience is what really kind of like jars you out of that kind of trust mindset. And then once you're not there, things just become combative. Like it's an unfortunate like human nature kind of thing where it's like, if I don't trust you, I'm micromanaging you. Now I want to be involved in decisions that I don't really have. Like, it's a struggle for control rather than this kind of like cyclical flow of, what is your need? How do I meet it? Here's the result. And then kind of, keep going. So yeah, I think that was kind of what was top of mind as we were going through that. Is just like, yeah, if I was having conversations with my friends and couldn't remember, what we talked about from one moment to the next, chances are they're not going to see us as very close friends. So yeah, and then they're trusting you with a lot. These projects are a lot. It's a huge undertaking throughout the entire organization, and there has to be that like mutual I got you kind of vibe.
Yeah. And this has been, I'm glad you brought that up, because two things come to mind. It's like, this is the reason that I changed the name of the fifth stage of the value path from customer to value creator, right? Because most teams, like one of the places we go terribly wrong is like, oh, you signed the contract, you're a customer. Now, like, trust doesn't matter because you're signed up, your company paid for it. So I'm not going to go through this trust building activity. Like, here's the checklist you got to go do it.
Mhm.
Right. And that doesn't usually work out. So understanding that people come into that point of the process, if you can understand that they need to create value, now it keeps you from assuming that trust has been built in any capacity, and that there is a relationship to be built, whether with them directly or making sure the internal champion who brought you in knows that that needs to be built and we're not making assumptions.
Mhm.
Right. And on the other side of this, this is why this is the most insidious trap, managed services trap. It is so hard to start from a place of trust when you look at these managed services contracts, like, that are built. I understand where they're coming from, but they are built from a place of that you cannot count on trust, like, anywhere. So all these decisions get baked in that are all cover your ass,
Mhm.
which inherently puts everybody in a place of distrust.
Right.
Right. So this is why it's so hard. And you can look at these contracts and look at the system, and we keep building on these systems. And the only way, it's so hard to build trust into them
Mhm.
and not just continue to build gates and supervision and enforcement and all these things that we just want to work. Meanwhile, like, they just climb the mountain with you. Like, they want to get back down too. Like, can we not just come to an agreement that nobody's going to push each other down the mountain
Right.
and like at the expense of other people, right?
Mhm.
And when you can get there with clients, and I think I've mentioned this before, these emergent scopes, right? Like creating the space to embrace, like, hey, by the way, this creates a lot of trust when you just say it, like, no, we don't know what's going to happen in 3 months. Can we just create a relationship that's prepared for that?
Mhm.
Like, that we don't know what's going to happen. So let's embrace what might happen,
Mhm.
right? And that's where you start to be able to make decisions from a place of, if some new value shows up, like somebody who wasn't participating is now participating and they're engaged in a way that we didn't expect them to be, can we enable them to be like, yeah, go do your thing? Like, we were going to implement that, and that's a part of the scope. But
Mhm.
if you want to do, if you want to, especially now, if you want to go use AI and just knock that out, like, we can put something else in the scope. We don't have to do that. We don't have to spend hours or effort on that,
Right.
right? Especially when you get to these teams and they've already built solutions, like usually in the form of like magnificent spreadsheets.
Right.
So they know exactly what the scope is of that thing. We're now in this discovery process of trying to refigure everything out, and people have already figured out. And those are the people that, like, they didn't come with you. Apparently I'm all in on this mountain analogy.
Mhm. Mhm.
They didn't come with you, but they see that you're up there and they've already built out their whole thing. And if you think you're going to come back down and say, like, oh, here's the new thing, we're going to do this. If you think that's going to go over well, like, it doesn't,
Right.
right? Like, that's where so much of this getting, like, share information openly,
Mhm.
right? This transparency that can be created by self-service, portals, but just being open in terms of, like, you have to remove the guard of, like, oh, this is me, this is what I'm getting paid for, this is my expertise, it's on the contract that I'm spending these hours on this thing,
Mhm.
right? There's so much to unravel there.
For sure. Yeah, and I think I think I misspoke earlier when I said, you get to the mountaintop and there's nowhere to go but down as far as trust. But I think the more I think about it, it's actually that you should be able to go up further from there, if that makes sense. Like, if you're doing your job and delivering on the value that was promised, then you do continue to go up and build that trust and bring more people with you. I think that's kind of my favorite leading indicator of success in a project, when someone who wasn't involved in the sales process comes to me with an idea of just like, hey, all this other stuff you've been building, like, that works great. I also have this other thing that maybe we could solve for. And, like, these are your boots on the ground in the system every day people. They are going to have a ton of value to offer, um, to what you're doing. And so I think in kind of locking yourself into one understanding of the project, you do a disservice to the value that you bring along the way. Um, because then you kind of have to shut it down and say, like, oh, we'll put that on the roadmap, or like, we can't prioritize that because it's not in this bank of hours. And it's like, yes, correct, but the outcome that we're trying to achieve, and I think we've talked about this in previous episodes, like, the outcome that we're trying to achieve is better served by this other thing that we just found out about. And you need to be agile enough to work that in, to make it happen one way or another. And so having more of like a dynamic understanding of where the value is coming from, and that it may not be one-to-one with what you thought in the scoping process. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the scoping process failed. It means that you didn't have kind of all the pieces.
Right.
And so I think kind of reframing it in that way, and being able, one of the things that I like to do is kind of give everything a score of like time, effort, expertise, like what's going to go into it and what is the expected ROI. Um, because even if I'm making those numbers up in my head, it's still a good way to kind of get thoughts on paper and figure out, like, strategically, is this a better fit, and what does that mean for the next, week sprint, 2-week sprint. And that's kind of the other thing, that I like to think of things as like sprint based. There's a lot of people who are not a fan of agile frameworks for a lot of reasons, and
None of them good.
I don't dispute anything. I think the terminology is helpful to me, in understanding, like, here's what here's the next big kind of value that we're shooting for, and breaking it down into the sprints helps me kind of figure out, okay, when can we prioritize these things, how quickly can we get this in the pipeline. It just, yeah, it gives me a framework to kind of be a little more flexible with the ongoing nature of the work.
Yeah. And just to be able to communicate it back, right? Like, because so much of it's at this point with AI just sitting there waiting to be activated, right? Sometimes the person that, like, they have all the context that in their head, but they haven't been a part of the process. And if you say something like, "Oh, yeah, that's not a scope. I mean, we can consider it. We'll put it on this list. We'll do this. We'll do that." That's like, you just shut down. There was value like punching you in the face, right? And they might not have any technical knowledge of the project or how to get it done. But if you can say, okay, and I'm not going to belittle it to prompts, but here's some things that you can do if you're open to using AI. Just share your expertise. And now all of a sudden, this thing that was going to take a ton of effort over here from people that didn't really have the true expertise to get that. So that person was going to be coming into the conversation at some point. When they show up and with the ideas, and we're not agile enough to say, okay, should this be a priority? This brand new resource just showed up that we were not planning on. And if we don't find a way to let this, I'm not scripting this, but if we don't find a way to let this value flow in, like, we're creating more work for no reason. And we are disenfranchising the person
100%.
who is just like willing to be involved.
Right.
Right. And those kinds of resource handouts, like, man, they can make or break projects. And it's the difference between like 3 months and 12 months sometimes, right? Because not only can you not receive it, like, the flow went back the other way. And now you've got to manufacture ways to contain it and reuse it by bringing that person back to the conversation. And there's just so much of our process in these delivery mechanisms that are designed to plan for that part, like help us say it's out of scope, and then have a backlog and a whatever to make sure it gets prioritized. And like, heaven forbid you got to get IT involved, then it's guaranteed to be like 6 months out. Right. And then by then the world's changed, like motivation's gone, people have changed. You're like, oh yeah, Like, let's discover this other thing that got put on the backlog 6 months ago.
Right.
And it's just this vicious process,
Hmm.
right? Where if we like, that's why these commitments, like if you can see them at face value and you're at that decision point, this is whether it's on the agency side, but definitely on the expectation side of the customers, like do not be okay with out of scope, like responses without at least a conversation of like, hey, man, this is a resource. There's value happening right here. What are we doing to enable it?
Hmm.
Right. And if you can come at it from the perspective, let's enable it, like instead of control it, manage it, like put it into this process that it clearly wasn't prepared for,
Hmm.
right? That can help, like just start the conversation. Because a lot of times when everybody's in CYA mode, the default is out of scope.
Hmm.
But when you can clearly define, oh, this chunk of work can now move over here. They've agreed. There's responsibility there. Now it enables other stuff to happen over here, and everybody starts using their natural expertise to solve things.
Hmm.
Man, just there's so many additional benefits
For
that
sure.
relate to like team buy-in, team alignment, culture change, like all that stuff just starts to be enabled at a level that you don't usually see.
Right. Right. And I think, yeah, it's so much of it is that it's a, it's a it's a human nature kind of issue where it's like people want to feel heard and included, and they like if they don't feel part of a solution, they're not as bought into it. And so I think that's been kind of a a big aha moment for me, just in dealing um with so many of these different types of projects, that that's really like it really just boils down to these very human, like, I need to trust you, I need to feel like I need to feel like we're rowing in the same direction, like I need to feel like we are aligned in the outcome and not in the method, because clients don't care about the method. Like, they didn't come to you for a method, they came to you for an outcome. And um yeah, and so being able to manage the very human side of things, where like, because at the end of the day, and maybe I'm overly sensitive to this, but when everyone's in CYA mode, like, you can feel it. Like, those
Mhm.
meetings are different, and it's not collaborative. Like, combative is probably a little extreme, but like, it feels like the whole vibe is just nothing but friction, where and that's not a telltale sign of people who are rowing in the same direction. It's like more like kind of playing tug of war. And yeah, that's not conducive to anything. Like, that's not helping anything. And one of the things that I've learned in having a lot of these conversations is, like, if you immediately say, oh, that's out of scope, and shut it down, that is one way to deal with the problem. But now, you know, you're setting yourself up for more of these conversations. Whereas if you kind of hear them out and understand, what the actual outcome we're trying to achieve here. So just kind of recentering on the outcome and hearing them out. Like, a lot of times I have found that, like, oh, that's actually not that big of a deal. That's not something that is going to take me a long time. It's not something, and sometimes it's like the more talk about it and say it out loud, they realize, oh, well, we're kind of already doing that over here. And so, yeah, it's like you don't want to just, everything is worth a conversation. Like it's not worth shutting it down and saying out of scope and hiding behind contracts. Um, if that's going to make the road ahead harder, like it's worth it in the moment to have the conversation and treat it like a conversation and not a like battleground where there are winners and losers, because if you're truly aligned on the outcome, like we win together or we lose together.
Right.
So
Which
yeah.
is the reality of the day to day, anyways. And it's like just everything that we build in order to prevent that during the meeting scenario, somebody is standoffish, and then they're going to leave the meeting and start effectively destroying the process, not intending to, but starting to share how they feel about the situation. This is where I understand how SaaS like can miss this, but when you're in an office, like in manufacturing, and I'm trying to, train on HubSpot, and there's a lack of engagement, it doesn't take long after the training session to hear feedback indirectly from people sharing about how they felt, right?
Mhm.
So, are you designing a process that creates the space to have those challenging conversations up front? And then, like, there's nuance to all of this, of course, but creating the space and then bringing people into the process versus trying to separate because they're going to slow things down or whatever the reason we tell ourselves, or we don't know how to, like they're going to distract the process and then we're going to focus on their thing and not the main mission. Like all of this is an effort to say like that everybody is a value center. And when you can focus on, like I love that scenario when people can share it in their way, the way that they know it,
Mhm.
but it's actually just like the thing that we're already doing, which is happening all over the place right now between HubSpot and AI and data and context. Like
Mhm.
it's like, yeah, we're doing that. You just see it as the HubSpot project, not the AI project.
Mhm.
And if we step back, right, and that's where I'm continue to be reminded of like the outcome of a unified customer view. Because I think the challenge of saying, okay, great, we're focused on outcomes. It's either super high level of, hey, we need revenue growth,
Right.
right? Or to make it tangible for everybody, it's like, we need to send an email that has this level of leads that come back because I'm measured on leads. And that's the outcome I want as a marketer. Well, that outcome is going to be different from sales. And you start to create, okay, let's have all these different outcome conversations that we can serve. Like natural misalignment happens when all of those situations where I think that we can be innovative with the outcomes and people are starting to respond to is a unified customer view, these unified view scenarios where visibility and transparency over what's happening naturally enables these kinds of flow and naturally disables the possibility of certain things getting in the way because somebody doesn't know it or doesn't trust the situation because it's right there in front of everybody all the time. Like that is a it feels like there's an art related to finding outcomes like that.
Mhm.
Because what something you said about people wanting to be seen and heard, every business there is there's an opportunity for standardization because every business serves customers and all those customers want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to be understood, and they want their expectations met.
Mhm.
No matter the industry, no matter what you're selling, like that human on the other side wants that.
Mhm.
Your humans on the inside want the same thing. And everybody needs visibility to
Mhm.
understand that that is actually like happening.
Mhm.
Right. So even today, as I was just on a, a new client call, and it's like, can we just change from everybody wanting to reporting to everybody wanting visibility?
Mhm.
Because that's usually why we want the reporting, to understand what's going on, right? And that is a mechanism, as I try to put all these pieces together in the moment, like asking for reporting versus asking for a unified customer view. Reporting has to go through all these like build channels to make sure everything's talking to each other. And I love doing this live, like you have pre-built in terms of HubSpot, pre-built CRM cards that when you just drag them in, the data's already in the system. You drag them in, and there's a customer lifetime value. Here's a health score. Here's like the last email. It's like, bam, like
Mhm.
there's your report. We're
Right.
calling it unified view, but that's exactly what you asked for to be reported on,
Mhm.
right? And that's where it's like getting teams aligned to understand, like there's usually almost always value sitting around, like in the data, in how we do things. We just have created these like handoff designs where it's like, oh yeah, I didn't want to bring that in because it's not a sales contact, right?
Mhm.
The sales doesn't need it, right? Meanwhile, sales is asking for all of that context,
Mhm.
right? So finding these moments of, I just want it to be this easy. Like find the value and figure out a way to let it go. Like,
Mhm.
I don't
Mhm.
know.
It sounds so like, yeah, much easier said than done for sure, because people are complex and tech stacks are complex, and putting those two things together is infinitely more complex. So it's like there's a lot of moving pieces. And I think your point earlier about there's like an art to defining these outcomes. Like I think that's so true, and like maybe we should do like a whole episode deep dive on like how to come up with something that is a measurable outcome that is not constricting value. So like an example would be not just like the outcome is not automate your process. It's automate 80% of manual input to this process. So now I can start, there's probably 50% that's like not low hanging fruit, but like you have a high degree of confidence that this is going to move the needle in some way or another. Implement that 50%. Now let's go talk to people. Let's figure out what ideas did that first 50% kind of spur, and then build the next 20%, and then do the whole thing again, where you're not saying I have mapped out 80% of what we're going to do. It's like we're going to find out along the way what 80% needs to get automated. um, and yeah, I think being able to put things in those terms is not intuitive at all, because especially like we want things to be either super broad or super specific, and it's kind of this like middle ground where like it is specific enough, but it leaves room for learning something new. um, and actually that really sums up my approach to most things. um, and I've kind of always been like this. It's like I just don't assume that I know everything. I kind of assume I don't know most things. And so at any given time, I'm I'm trying to plan for the 10 different possible outcome, like the quantum state of the future. and really just trying to get like a probability of like what's more likely to be helpful, what's more likely to move the needle. And so again, like I do not feel like this is an intuitive way of thinking, but it is like a muscle that you can train where you can, it starts with kind of recognizing like, is this outcome too broad or too specific? And then kind of working backwards from there and figuring out, what's going to enable that value flow. Like, what could I possibly learn in the future that's going to make something more or less valuable? And just kind of like hedge your bets until the answer becomes more clear because more value has come into the system or more information. um yeah, it's more about being willing to say, hey, we didn't know that before, but that changes things, and here's how. And not being afraid of that and not letting that feel like failure of some like upstream process. It's like, really, if you're doing things right, these kinds of things are going to come up. And so being of a different mindset about that, I think is really important to make the whole system work.
Yes, and that is, man, that's a perfect segue. That's what we're going to be talking about next week. Commitment number 3 is we will adapt continuously to emerging needs rather than enforcing rigid plans.
Like, I swear we don't script this, y'all. Like, it really is just that, like, it's a natural conversation that,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
So,
and this is like how simple it could be. Like there's so many pillars and all these commitments because there's just nuance to all of it, right? Like it's hard to adapt continuously if you're trying to control everything,
mhm,
right? It's hard to enable natural value flow if you're prioritizing requirements over outcomes,
mhm,
right? Like, so all of this stuff ties together. And that's what we're going to be diving into next week. This has been a fun conversation,
for
as
sure.
always.
Yeah.
And we hope it was valuable for you who are watching. And until next week, thanks so much, Erin.
Yeah. Thank you.